Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go. Well, folks, we are back with a new episode for a new year and season. I know it feels like a new year. It felt like ages ago, but we're back. Nick Nack Goes to the Movies. It was a shorter season last year and a late start to this one, but we're back better than ever. Every medical nonsense issue of the past and being a literal stone factory could only keep me down for so long. So now it is time to talk some movies that, we're back on the airwaves and back to theaters. Now, which of these movies post Black Panther 2 are we talking about? Well, I had a blast with both Megan or M3 Gan and Violent Night, both which are getting sequels. I'm actually talking about instead, though, one of the first big name pictures, at least going into it, of 2023, even though those are both pretty good. That is, of course, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, one of the longest titled movies of the MCU that we'll be mostly referring to from here on out as Ant-Man 3. Look, there have been over 30 movies, a handful of shows, and a couple specials, and we are now in the beginning of Phase 5. The cries are out there for quantity over quality. Some out there may even be saying you could have just stopped after Endgame. But if you know anything about me, I'm a big completionist for franchise. Even if you make me watch The Nun and The Conjurings, I'm going to do it, apparently. And I also have a big soft spot for, horror movies, of course, but superhero things as well. Honestly, started a new horror series, new to me at least, The Exorcist show. Never saw the movie, but that show's pretty good, so almost done with that too. But got to focus on superhero things for this episode at least. Next episode, we'll go back to horror. And look, this is the former, and this may be some important information for you, and this may help you decide if you want to continue your MCU journey. I know I probably will be doing this for ages to come, but, this is a starting point of Phase 5, so let's find out together if you, and honestly, if I should continue. Who's in this thing? Well, Ant-Man, as a franchise, because, they've got separate actors for franchises. They're not all combined as Avengers all the time. And there's its own cast of characters that were introduced way back in the summer of 2015 at the end of Phase 2. That was kind of the start of the more lesser-known properties with both Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, both of which could be coming closer to the end of their solo group of franchise entries, with most of these topping out at 3. But while some of the characters are lesser known, the stars have been here with this franchise, including the likes of Paul Rudd and Michael Douglas. Almost all the main cast is back, including Evangeline Lilly, and a thankfully more prominent role for Michelle Pfeiffer after her brief role in Ant-Man and the Wasp and Endgame. One of the bigger changes was aging up and changing the actor behind Ant-Man's daughter for the second time. She was played by one actor for the first 2 solo movies, then she was aged up for a brief Endgame role, and she was changed once again for this movie for a more prominent role. Now in the role is Catherine Newton, who you may remember from the much better than it had any right to be Pokemon live-action Detective Pikachu movie. With this being the third movie, you have had some staple characters and actors in this franchise. And in Thor's case, they kill a ton of those off, including the Warriors 3, his dad, his mom. Here they just kind of decided one of the more interesting things of this paternal struggle would kind of be used more for the grandparents and not include Judy Greer or Bobby Cannavale, both who have been things I like, be it some of the Halloweens or from Boardwalk Empire, a great HBO show that I feel like not as many people have seen as they probably should. It's like Mad Men, but older and better and a little more aggressive and not just smoking indoors. But they're not really using this group of parents at all. They also got rid of the Ant-Man friend group, and even if one of them is a voice actor in another role, I can't be the only one who missed Michael Pena for the more probably fun parts of the entire franchise. His staple character role and his kind of flashback quirks is one of my favorite parts of this franchise. It's funny how this movie goes like real hard in the beginning with a ton of relations and characters of the past, but fails to include others. Like having the Baskin-Robbins manager from the first one in the moment, of including Randall Park back from the second one and Paul Rudd hanging out doing some magic tricks. There was some super fun attention to detail stuff early on, but also there was a lot missing. And we'll get to the not as hidden surprises, not as groundbreaking as maybe what Black Panther 2 had. But before that, Jonathan Majors. Jonathan Majors. He came to my attention with the very weird and very good HBO show Lovecraft Country. That was all I needed. He had a brief stint teased role in Loki, but like the rest of you, I really wanted to see how he would do as a variant of Kang in this one, who has a little more to do, as can fully come out and play and be seen in the role. And let me tell you, if you're looking for one reason alone to watch this movie, it is him. He is him. Himothy, Himi Neutron, all the other him variants you could come up with. Jonathan Majors, as every Kang out there who looks to be the new big bad of the MCU for a while, he steals a show. And you could and should watch this movie for him alone. This is also a note to myself, and I guess to you if you haven't done it yet, really have to get around to seeing him and Chadwick Boseman both in Da 5 Bloods on Netflix. We'll get there at some point if we haven't already. So, off to the beginning of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, like I said, Ant-Man 3. Anytime we see Kang, I'm enthralled. And we knew there was eventually going to be a flashback to the time that Michelle Pfeiffer spent in the quantum realm. Getting her out was such a plot point in the second one, even with, Lawrence Fishburne and Hannah John Kamen, who were important with that process not being back here at all. We knew that Pfeiffer was going to have a bigger role in this movie because she kind of had to. And at times she takes the guiding role of kind of the Ant-Man group, where Douglas had been doing that in the first two. Also, she's kind of parallel to the whole notion of raising her kids, which has been a staple of these movies, which once again, they have. It's just weird that they took out the other two parental characters from the movie. And I get it, you want to focus on your superhero and all the super people, but there was something kind of nice and grounded having those other important characters important in the movie, and it felt like this girl has spent so much time with that side of her parents, and, in her development, she's just not there with those people. It's weird to think about. Weird choice. Look, I did not know what I wanted out of an Ant-Man movie. I enjoyed the first movie. It was good fun. But it didn't blow the doors off, maybe like some other Marvel movies. The second was honestly probably pretty close to the first one. A little worse in some ways and a little better in other ways. But the tone of those two movies was always there, right? There was a little bit of drama, but honestly there was a really good balance, I thought, of the humor that a lot of Marvel movies don't always hit. And it felt like, if nothing else, maybe like some of the Spider-Mans and like the first two Ant-Mans kind of hit that wall. And it's probably because Paul Rudd is, genuinely a funny guy, and he is a good character and good cast in the role. This movie at times, this third entry, kind of felt a bit lost to me. The Kang intro was fun, and these flashbacks early on seemed like the exciting add to the franchise for newer things, to not just be a rehash of the first two. But I was really digging this movie early on. Like I said, the attention to detail, bringing MCU legend Randall Park, who had more room to play in WandaVision. And, we as a society, I think, want more Randall Park in the MCU. There's been talk of him getting his own MCU show. Who never knows anymore with those and what they're going to do. But I think we're pretty pro Randall Park in general. Sad he only got a small role in this. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel like we kind of see that Scott has done, right? Going from this guy who stole the suit to, obviously, he saved the world, and he's kind of resting on his laurels a little bit. And also that Baskin-Robbins stuff was so funny with the same actor from the first one. And I really did expect, I get it, right? The thought is, you'd say Ant-Man's kind of grown past some of the initial stuff, going through all the stuff, but you really wish some of the other mainstays from the franchise were there, and they're just not there in this entry. And all three movies relate to family. Like I said, the grandparents is definitely the group raising Rudd Stutter, but how did it get to that part? And what about the other group? It's not like they just lost custody. I have so many questions about this movie sometimes. I get it, right? The focus is on this immediate family, but I just wonder so much. Now, this new actor daughter is kind of the inciting incident of, wanting to do something to save people. And I get it, you're kind of tying it back to the Paul Rudd that we remember from the first movie briefly, but that was more of a baseline setup and not a true, important part, I think, as the characters developed. And it was weird that was kind of the angle they went of, oh, you have to save people, but he did already. But, I don't know. I feel like at least there's some family generational trauma and stuff, of seeing the daughter who didn't have her dad all the time, and then seeing that portrayed with Michelle Pfeiffer and Evangeline Lilly's characters. You kind of see parallel, mirrors of each other. And look, we like a little going through trauma and processing grief and all those things. And, so that's why we see Michelle Pfeiffer's character not really be able to open up and talk about some of that stuff. And all this combines into a family drama and a forced getting things off your chest as everyone gets dragged back into the quantum realm, which we've, as an audience, have never really seen a whole lot. We have a vague idea, but we've seen so little of it that we don't really, I guess, get the true scope of it. And I'm getting that that's probably the thing that, should be the exciting part of the movie, right? This new exciting world, all that stuff. But honestly, for me, this movie loses a bit of steam at this point. We've been talking so much about the multiverse and the buildup of that being the next looming threat, but there's a whole civilization in this quantum verse, and it's just smaller. And in the grand scheme of things, like Paul Rudd even says in the movie early on, not to the same malice, I guess, but it doesn't really matter to him and his family and the MCU that we care about. Like, we wanted to learn some quantum realm stuff, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't really matter that we're probably never going to come back to this realm, and maybe it'll be more important than we realize. But this feels more like a convoluted vehicle to introduce Kang. Like, instead of using a normal car, you're using one of the Flintstone ones with your feet. Like, I like, obviously, that we got to see a more intimidating version of Kang than the one we saw in Loki, and that's important. Like, they're all sort of local people and wacky characters. The cantina scene is not unlike, what we're used to in some of those Star Wars movies. I think people really wish the movie was more akin to maybe like a Star Wars, and it just wasn't that. Like I said, I don't know what I wanted, but I had ideas of what could have been cool, and it just wasn't that. I just don't think in the long, run, some of these things will matter in the MCU, and this eventual victory doesn't change things, and I don't think it's going to matter in the grand scheme of things at all. And, so we split off the group, and, right, you have the group of people who have to open up to different groups of people. So Paul Rudd's with his daughter, and they have to go through their relationship in the same way that Douglas, Pfeiffer, and Lily, who kind of really haven't had a lot of that family pairing that we've seen, at least, get a little more time to shine the spotlight. And like I said, they make sense, and I love that Pfeiffer has so much more to do in this movie than she had previously. Bill Murray's in this. Cool, right? That should be exciting thing. I don't think he really added much to the story. He was there and gone in a heartbeat, and I don't know. He didn't do anything really. I mean, there was no real add. He could have been any generic character or actor, and it wouldn't have changed the role at all. Like, he did way more in his Zombieland role, be it the first one or even the post credit in the second one. And like, that's a fun short role, but it's important and great that Bill Murray's in that movie. I don't think he added anything to this, and that's not his fault. The role didn't matter. The other Ant-Man group met this Resistance group that, once again, it didn't really matter. I feel bad that I keep saying that, but I guess I was looking and keeping my ears out for who David Dastmalchian is, who was obviously one of the friends in the group early on. Character actor. He's done a lot of stuff that you've seen. The Dark Knight role briefly as one of the guards, and we'll get into more of that stuff, but he was the voice of the blob creature, which, once again, I don't think it was his fault, but terrible writing, humor, dialogue, and it just never really did it for me. I would not have realized that was him, and that's weird because I think he was great in the first two of these where there was good humor and good writing, and I thought that group and everyone, a part of those first movies, could be funny. The script or whatever was just not here for him. And remember how good he was in the Suicide Squad as Polka Dot Man, or is it Suicide Squad? I forget which one's which. The James Gunn one, not the David Ayer cut one. Great movie. And while it's not pertinent to this, I once again, when I think of it, I can't hold it in. I wish we could get the full DCU that was initially laid out, and I hope it will come. Obviously, it doesn't feel likely at all now. But with the Snyder Justice League movies, 2 and 3 they were going to do, the Deathstroke Batman movie with Affleck, that was kind of like taking away parts of his life that sounded really cool. Kind of probably like what they did with Arrow and Deathstroke. That also was really good, with Manu Bennett doing a great job in the role. And probably the least likely of everything is the haircut of Suicide Squad, which feels like it's the easiest, but also somehow the less likely to do. It just feels impossible now, and we'll see what James Gunn does with all this. He's laid out at least a groundwork for what his initial plan is. Pour one out for what could have been, though. So now comes that big surprise, and it's kind of been out there, not as excitingly hidden as maybe what the Black Panther big comeback was in the sequel. MODOK is a weird character. It's just a weird floating head dude, little arms. If you don't know who the character is, weird character. It was always going to be weird to make that in live action. And look, it is a comic book franchise. Things are weird, over the top. So it's not like you can't make things believable. You have to suspend some disbelief in a comic book franchise. And things happen all the time. It's just a matter of translating those things from written media and animation to live action media, where the common viewer can enjoy it and still have the fandom. The hardcore fans appreciate that there's still some sense of comic book accuracy. There was probably always a question of how this zany creature would adapt to the MCU, not just Marvel movies, but to the MCU as it exists. It could have gone great, like, how they made Groot or some of those other, very much just a CGI kind of creation that Groot has gone to be one of the more lovable things, like Grogu in The Mandalorian. But it also could have gone terrible, like Galactus in the second Fantastic Four movie from 2007, it was more like a vague idea of like space dust, and it wasn't a physical manifestation that we would have expected. And that franchise, those Fantastic Four movies, really went so wrong so quickly. Oh man, so bad, those two. And look, I don't even think obviously we like Michael B. Jordan, but and I actually liked a lot of the casting in the 2015 Fantastic Four movie. It just was a bad movie. And for you Miles Teller's lovers of Top Gun Maverick, do not watch Fantastic Four, because he might be the worst part of that movie. Besides some of the terrible CGI and there's a lot of problems with Fantastic Four. We're hoping they bring it back together in the MCU with this alleged period piece kind of idea, which sounds great. Love more historical fiction, and still going to hold out hope that Krasinski can come back in the role, because I think he did pretty good in his brief stint in the role. You never know, right? Who could come back and around. And there's actually been some MODOK stuff recently enough in just media presentation. One of those Avengers video games, that might have been the Square Enix one, had a version of MODOK that I think was pretty well done and not so weird. Still had a little bit of the quirkiness, but it was at least felt grounded in somewhat of a reality. And they even had a version that obviously was very out of left field, but I think it worked with the adult animated Hulu show starring that character. And I think when we saw some of the first images of what MODOK looked like, it was more the mechanical robot version, and the look I was kind of digging. It looked a lot closer to comic accurate. And not that that's the most important thing to me. My comic reading is very limited in scope. I'm trying to get through the boys' comics. Not my favorite, especially with how much better the show is. And I just need to fill the void of your more aggressive, crasser superhero commentary shows. But other than that, it really is just The Walking Dead. But having a recognition of comic stuff is a cool touch, while shaping it to the MCU look and feel, and kind of finding that balance. But under the MODOK metal mask was this super weird version of Corey Stoll, an actor that I really like him. Now they had to make him different from the first movie, but still somewhat, the same visage and obviously his voice. But when we see under the mask, it's like this stretched out version of the character we remember, but like nothing else. The CGI looks like something out of a bad 90s or early 2000s movie. Spawn, the Mummy sequel, the Spy Kids movie, 2003 Ang Lee Hulk movie, among other things. But there was this one villain from, it was either Spy Kids or Sharkborn Lava Girl or something like that. Like, it was a guy who looks like a big old mirror zoomed in version of his face. And that was like his whole thing. That was put in front of us. And the texture looks like it's all messed up, and it's like super, super soft, and maybe this will grow on me over time. You never know. I doubt it. I mean, I don't know if I would say Thor Dark World's as bad as I think it was when I first saw it with Redbox, but it's still not good. It's just maybe time has lessened the blow. I even think the same thing with that Matrix 4 movie. I still didn't like it, but maybe it's, you saw it again like, okay, was it as bad? I don't know. It's still bad. And the good thing is MODOK's not the main villain anyway. And once we do meet Kang and think less about the MODOK face textures, Kang, played by Jonathan Majors, is super cool, menacing. He's has that unhinged but still very commanding and in control of what he's doing kind of menace when he's like beating up his own guys. He's beating up Paul Rudd. He's like threatening his daughter and like trying to all he can to get what he wants. And Majors is so good in this movie and in this role. And this does lead to probably one of the cooler visual parts of the whole movie. And it has a really interesting idea. The Schrodinger's cat principle. I promise this science thought experiment is relevant to this episode. And in short, there's a cat in a box, and it has an equal probability chance to be alive or dead. Rick and Morty did an episode on this. No surprise with the whole sci-fi vibe on that show. And Ant-Man did that here as well. And the thought is saying, the cat in the box is, until you lift the box, perception is it's both dead and alive at the same time in equal parts. And it only is found out when the box is lifted. Philosophy and all that fun stuff. And honestly, I thought Ant-Man looked at this principle and did it pretty cool with this probability storm. And, Paul Rudd has to fix his time mechanic that Pfeiffer broke early on. And I think this was a cool scene. Just a lot of weird stuff happened to get us here. Like, there were moments and set pieces that were cool. It's just the in-between stuff was not. And the visual of how they did this with variants of him continuing to pop up, including a Baskin-Robbins one. There was something cool about this sci-fi element and eventually having all of the Rudds have a singular focus and make the probability just become one thing. And look, they had that kind of meme thing of, look at us. I don't know what that's from, but when they're like, he's like having a drink with himself. And they're all going in on the same version and helping him save his daughter by just finding that's the end goal of doing this thing. It's also how we see him reunite for the first time in the movie since they got into this zone with Evangeline Lilly. And it's cool to see how the two of them handle differently their probability variations. Easily the coolest set piece moment of the movie that doesn't involve Jonathan Majors. Now after this, the ants that got pulled into the Quantumverse have a cool moment of being hyper evolved and helping in the end, and it gives Michael Douglas a bit more to do because he really doesn't do a lot in this movie. It's they're trying to give Pfeiffer more as the expert of the area. Now the big CGI fight for the Quantum Realm, once again, it doesn't feel like it really matters, this battle. It doesn't even feel necessarily earned all the time. Where the big fight for Asgard and Ragnarok, we'd seen Asgard a few times. It felt like it was a more lived in place that had real stakes, so it felt earned. And when it eventually blew up, it kind of felt like, man, that felt like a big stakes moment, because even though they won, they lost. Here's just a bunch of stuff happening that didn't always make sense or even matter. I mean, sorry, that's just how I feel. Now when Kang eventually does get involved in the fight, stuff is cool. That's probably a good way to describe this movie at all for the whole thing. It's crazy. His powers on display. I actually like the massive smart ants overpowering him and ruining his day a bit. It just took a weird set piece battle to get us to that point. I don't mind the idea of, the ants are always underestimated and help save the day in different ways. I just don't care about the quantum realm. I really don't. And somewhere along the way, MODOK redeems himself in a way that almost does not feel super earned either, and more of just a strange, about face for the character. They could have been time in this movie to kind of have these more developed, pronounced character development things. But it was all taken up this time, a lot of this movie, with this uninteresting Quantumverse stuff. And I get the idea of Cassie making her dad be the hero again and not just living off his new fame. But it just all felt wrong, and like it just felt kind of hollow. Something was missing. And look, the day is saved again. Everyone comes back to the normal world. Kang actually almost gets out, and that fight is also amazing. And like a one-on-one battle between him and Rudd. And yes, Majors is once again really cool, and he kind of kicks the crap out of Rudd. And you kind of figure, okay, dang, that's what's going to happen. It's a cool scene. And honestly, I would have been curious what this movie would have looked like if he died. Kang was trapped there, saving reality. Kang was stranded there, and that was it. It's not what we got, though. Instead, Lily comes back to save the day. They almost defeat Kang by accident. And in the process, it looks like they're going to lock themselves away in the strange realm. And in the process, they lock themselves away in the strange realm, which feels like a problem until their smart daughter easily makes a portal back for them to come, back to. Now, imagine if she did this in Kang 1. That would have been a brutal and honestly a little funny. And honestly, I would have even not hated the thing of, them sacrificing themselves and the two of them being in the quantum realm, and that being how the movie also ended. But, this is more of a circle story where Scott once again is doing his normal routine. All the family is closer after this, which this movie kind of started off with that, with the end of the last one. But, I did like the end and making it all seem like it's fine, but foreshadowing the whole problem bound to come up in the future MCU. You would hope he tells others in the Avenger group. It's all super different with new members, but you kind of expect there to be a thing post-credits, from Shang-Chi. We kind of saw who was in this new Avengers group and who were kind of the big-name members. And yes, the post-credit scenes, one was really just a Loki teaser. I'm still not sure if I like Loki or not. But the other one, oh man, seeing all the Kangs and the big problem they will totally cause, super exciting, especially finally seeing what Jonathan Majors can bring when he has a chance to do a little more than what he did with Loki. It'll be cool to see all the different ones, the different Kangs who he'll play and be able to flex his acting chops with the variants. And while we still wait to see who will play Mr. Fantastic, I did like Krasinski in Multiverse of Madness. Whoever they pick, the portal entrances in that movie for Krasinski were the same for the Kangs being used as they were portaling in for the post-credit scene, which tentatively leads to the fact that they are related. Kind of cool. There's also rumors he could be related to Black Panther. There's so many questions. So this up and down movie review, honestly, it sounds a little more negative when I was recording it than when I wrote it. But I liked pieces. Some other ones, not so much. But let's, look at the old Letterboxd rating with some subtle adjustments with it being an MCU project. And while the rating is important on its own, this is the 31st movie in the franchise, and there have been some notion of ranking all these to my Letterboxd list on the MCU. So, the first two Ant-Man movies sit around 2/3 down on the list. Just on the cusp of 3.5 stars. And I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, as similar as those first two movies were in ranking and tone and everything else, they were both fine. Not perfect, not terrible, but fine. I think I'm going to give this one a little lower at 3 stars, which maybe that's a little high. I feel like this is going to live, for me at least, just under the first Thor and Incredible Hulk movies, which I like much more than a lot of other people do. And my list, and I've kind of explained a little bit, it kind of depends on, either having interesting villains or just things that are different and fun compared to some other MCU projects, which sometimes feel a little bit similar. I have this right above Age of Ultron, which, while there was some fun stuff, some of that dialogue, and I love James Spader, but they wrote Ultron so weird. It's just so much of this has aged poorly, with so many better MCU hero solo movies than that, which is a bummer because that should have been a big one. So it's at 23, and if you want to see the full list, make sure to take a look at it on Letterboxd to see that, all my lists, and all the movies I've been watching these days. And the 3 stars for this one pretty much relate to Jonathan Majors as Kang. He's cool, menacing, and is a chemistry vacuum. There are some cool visuals, great fight choreography, especially when it involves Kang, and the Ant-Man fam, even with missing some key pieces of it, there's some good character development with the family coming closer together, even though it felt like the last movie ended with everything seemed like it could have been fine. The problem really stems from the quantum realm in the grand scheme of things. Really, just it doesn't matter. And I think that Corey Stoll's MODOK was maybe half good at best. I said it before, but the in-machine costume is good. Once the mask is removed, Corey Stoll looks like something out of Spy Kids, which is not a compliment. Some of that CGI is abysmal. And, it makes, like I said, the half-scorpion The Rock seem, well, not good, but it feels like that Mummy Returns thing is comparable to this. And I thought it was Spy Kids, but I did eventually look it up, and upon further review and research, while that has some bad CGI stuff, MODOK actually looks like the villain from, I don't know if I've ever actually seen it. I've just seen scenes from it, probably on TikTok, of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and there's this character played by George Lopez called Mr. Electric, all the way back in 2005, which other movies have had much better CGI coming out much earlier than that. And in that movie, George Lopez is just a weird stretched out face. It looks like someone put a big magnifying glass over his face, and that's all they did. This and the Heimdall Sun CGI and Thor Love and Thunder, some of the later MCU stuff has gotten a bit weak, sloppy, or bad overall. So, is this the second coming of MCU greatness or something that will live in the annals of history of the record-breaking, illustrious franchise? Probably not, no. The villain was really good here. Jonathan Majors and all these Kang variants give us something unique and fun for the future. He's great. He's just not great in the movie because the movie is not really the movie meant to be the proper vehicle to get him out there, which is unfortunate. This movie is not perfect. Only a few are really, really good overall, but this movie is fine. Not amazing, not terrible. You could totally watch it again. If it's a coming out party for Majors and there's some fine Paul Rudd stuff along the way with his family, that's all lovely. There were just some weird choices that at times made this feel like a generic, weird sci-fi movie and not as much of a true Ant-Man movie in the vein as the other ones, which is weird because I really liked that tone of those two movies. Another cool villain is introduced in a less than serious movie, sadly. And it's not as bad or painful to watch as what, Thor Love and Thunder did to a very good Christian Bale performance, but it's not so off either. And I think Majors did a little better than Bale did, which we love Christian Bale, obviously, but it's just weird that the last two movies have a kind of troubling trend for that. I think Black Panther did a pretty good job when you think of like the last three MCU movies that have come out with the villain that was good and sympathetic and Namor was great. But if two of the last three were kind of bad, with good villains, just bad movies with things around that, I don't know. Not as bad as Thor Love and Thunder, but not great. But that's just my opinion. Although I want to know, what did you think of the latest Ant-Man movie and the kickoff of Phase 5? Did it do it for you? If it did, I'd love to hear about it and what it did for you. Did it partly do it for you, or did it just disappoint? Let us know at social at either Knickknack Movies, Knickknack_IC, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and so many more. Well, that's all the time we have today or tonight or whenever you're listening to this. So cheers, and as always, until next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained?
I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.